21-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of arson with intent to endanger life after counter-terrorism police were investigating 3 separate fires at properties linked to Keir Starmer, one of which is understood to be his private residence and caused damage to the entrance to the property, as you can see in this video here by The Sun, which I will link in the description below. I suspect that they might investigate for other offences as well, but obviously I can't say too much about that just yet because this is a live case. What I can do is explain very generally how the law of arson works. It's covered under the Criminal Damage Act of 1971, under Section 1, which is the destroying or damaging property. Now, speaking very generally for a moment, you might recall a separate video that I did on burning a religious book in public. Now, there is one very general point that I will address because there was a question raised elsewhere where somebody said, surely it is arson because he's burning property in a public place. But that's not quite right, and it's a very good question because the property in question must belong to somebody else for the simple version of criminal damage, whether that be damage by fire or damage otherwise, generally. Under Section 1, a person who without lawful excuse destroys or damages any property belonging to another, intending to destroy it or damage any such property, or being reckless as to whether any such property is damaged or destroyed, shall be guilty of an offence. So ordinarily, for the simple criminal damage or simple arson, I'll come back to that in a moment, must belong to somebody else. However, the arrest in this case is on suspicion of arson with intent to endanger life, which is a very much more serious offence, and it doesn't matter whether the property belongs to him or not. So ordinarily, burning your own possessions wouldn't be arson because they belong to you and not somebody else, and therefore they don't fit the definition in the legislation. However, if you intend or are reckless as to whether you endanger life, then it doesn't matter whether the property belongs to you or not. Under subsection 2, a person who without lawful excuse destroys or damages any property, whether belonging to himself or another, either intending to destroy or damage it or being reckless as to whether any property will be destroyed, and intending by the destruction to endanger the life of another, or being reckless as to whether the life of another would be thereby endangered. So very generally speaking, not speaking about this specific case, but very generally speaking, if you are reckless as to whether the life of another is endangered, then obviously it doesn't matter whether the property belongs to you or not. And that could be any kind of property. Could be a vehicle, could be a building, or any other kind of property at all. And so as you can see from subsection 3, if an offence is committed under this section by destroying or damaging by fire, it is charged as arson. So either simple arson under subsection 1 or arson with intent to endanger life under subsection 2. So arson with intent is the more serious offence. More about the penalty in just a moment. So just to summarise, if somebody were to, without lawful excuse, destroy or damage any property, whether belonging to himself or anybody else, either intending to endanger somebody's life or reckless as to whether life is endangered, that would be arson with intent or to be reckless to endanger life. Now, the criminal penalty for that, if convicted of such an offence, it's triable only on indictment, only in the Crown Court, and the maximum is life imprisonment. As you can see, there is a range table in the sentencing guidelines, but just looking at the culpability and harm factors here, culpability A is very simple, the offender intended to endanger life, or culpability B, the offender was reckless as to whether life was endangered. So if, hypothetically, somebody were charged and convicted of an offence of setting fire to either a building or a vehicle outside somebody's building, and they were reckless as to whether life was endangered, that would then fall under category B if they were reckless, or if the intent can be shown, let's say they knew they were there, or they knew somebody was there, or they knew somebody was likely to be there, and that they could prove intent, then that would come under culpability A. As to the harm level, then obviously there's 3 categories here, as you can see on screen. Category 1, the most serious, either there's very serious physical or psychological harm caused, a high risk of very serious physical and or psychological harm, serious consequential economic or social impact to the offence caused, very high value of damage caused. So these things could be impacted by who it was, where it was, whether there was a significant psychological impact on the person involved. And if in a case where there are multiple, hypothetically speaking, where there are multiple attacks in multiple locations, if they were all proven to be the same person, causing a coordinated attack, or even coordinator or the same person was involved in all 3 attacks, for example, that would obviously be very much more serious. Category 3 at the bottom end, where there is no or minimal physical or psychological harm, low risk of serious physical and or psychological harm, or low value of damage caused. And category 2, those that fall between 1 and 3. So in most cases, this will be relatively straightforward as to where this is charged, but just taking an example of a category 1A, the most serious, the starting point would be 8 years custody. And obviously, as I said, it's a life imprisonment as a maximum sentence. So again, to reiterate, none of that is to speak specifically about this case because a man's been arrested. This is just generally explaining the law to you on that particular offence. But as I say, in such a scenario, there may well be investigations for other offences, etc. But as I say, that will be down to the police and counter-terrorism investigation to investigate and report as they deem necessary via national security and so on. Obviously, as these properties are in relation to a high-profile public figure, Sir Keir Starmer. So I'll let you know if and when there's any more to report, any more that we can talk about. But for now, that's just a general explanation as to what arson is and arson with intent is and how it's charged. Hope you found that useful. Please do like the video and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.